Good morning. It is 9 o'clock. We are here for the hearing examiner agenda. Today, Tuesday, January 7th, 2020, the first meeting of 2020. I'm calling the hearings to order at this time. I do have some preliminary comments to make. If you have a cell phone with you today, please turn off or silence your cell phone. I'm going to double check that mine is off, actually. Okay. Yep, mine is off. And if you have any cell phone conversations that you need to engage in during the time period that the hearings are being conducted, please take your conversation outside the room if possible, and if not, at least please take them into another distant corner of the room so that we do not accidentally record what you have to say. If you have comments, I'm asking you please come to the microphone so we can properly record your testimony. Anyone who provides testimony is requested to fill out a public participation card so we can properly spell your name. And if you wish a copy of the hearing examiner recommendation or order, as the case may be, please provide your email contact information. But please also be aware that if you do that, at the time you provide it, your email address becomes part of the public record. I do have a request, and I will address this when the hearing is open. I do have one request to speak, but the person who's requesting it has not provided their name. So since there aren't a lot of people in the audience today, we can sort that out when the hearing is open, not at this time, but that's just sort of a minor housekeeping point. All testimony must be under oath, as I've already indicated. I'd like to introduce our process. The process followed in Cape Coral is a little different than the process followed in other jurisdictions. The clerk reads introduction of the case. The clerk then swears in anyone who is providing testimony today. The city staff then testifies as to compliance with public notice requirements, and then the applicant goes first because this is a request for a continuance. There is not a requirement to present the entire case. City staff will go second and address the request for continuance, and then public comment. We will be taking public testimony today, even though there's a request for a continuance that has already been made. Once public testimony is concluded, it will not be reopened. And then the applicant makes any final comments, has an opportunity to respond to public comment if he or she requests or desires to do so, and staff does the same, and then the hearing is concluded. And we'll move on to the next item on the agenda after that hearing is concluded. So at this time, we are moving to agenda item number 3, and it says local planning agency public hearing, which it's not, but we can fix that, I guess. This is a glitch for our first meeting of 2020. I'm going to ask the clerk to please call the agenda item A. Thank you.
Case PDP 18-0008. The address is undetermined. The applicant is MSI Holdings LLC. This is a continuance from November 5th and December 17, 2019, from those two hearings. Anybody giving testimony today? If you're able, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, Chad Boyko, Principal Planner with the DCD Division. And I'm here to announce that the case has been properly advertised. We sent letters out to residents within 500 feet of the subject site. We posted a sign at the site, and then we also placed an ad in the newspaper. All of this was done prior to 10 days before this hearing. So I just want to let you know that it's been properly advertised, and I'll let the applicant make their motion or their request for the continuance at this time.
All right, I will find that proper notice was given. Thank you. All right, can we have the applicant up, please?
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. I'm Rosemarie Fusco, the urban planner with Ensight, representing MSI Holdings. Thank you for letting us come before you again today after a couple different missed dates. We would like to request a continuance for February 11th, if that meets your schedule and the schedule for the city. The plans, full set of plans have been turned into the city last week, and I do have a full set printed for you today as well. So we are just waiting on the staff report. Since the last time we saw each other, we presented to the general body of the Sandoval Community Association, had 2 in-person meetings with the community board as well. The most recent being this past week, which was one of the reasons for continuing for today and aiming for today and then asking for a continuance as well. So we've hashed out a lot of things, and I think that they've both been really beneficial meetings, and there are a lot of changes to the plans, as you'll see. So.
Do you have a supplemental to your original application in addition to the plans?
A supplemental written portion? We do, but just in PowerPoint form.
Okay. Well, in order to move the hearing when it occurs along expeditiously, I think it would be helpful to have that converted into a supplemental document in addition to the PowerPoint, but more importantly, to indicate where the proposed modifications will be to the original report, because otherwise I would have to review all of the original report and all of the changes. So I would be asking for that. I still don't have a copy of the environmental, and this is something that troubles me because I'm sure you're aware that I have received, I would estimate, well over 400 emails. Many of them addressed environmental concerns. And I asked at the last hearing, the continuance hearing that was engaged in December, for a copy of the environmental. It was never part of the documents that were put online. I still don't have a copy of that. And we're talking about a hearing that was originally scheduled back in early November. Hang on, Mr. Boyko, I'm not done yet. So that troubles me because environmental is something that the public is extremely concerned about. And secondly, I need to advise you on an evidentiary basis that, what is the date of the environmental?
I can't remember offhand when the original environmental was done. I think that Chad, has.
All right, well, I'm going to assume that it was, this case has a number of 2018. So I would assume that the environmental was presented to the city sometime in 2018 or possibly early 2019. I'd like to get an answer to that. But in any event, I'd like to draw your attention to something so there's no surprises here. I'm assuming that the environmental was done prior to the hearing, otherwise the hearing would not have gone forward. That's a given. However, I have received a substantial amount of evidence via emails from the public that address environmental concerns, which I am assuming are subsequent to the date of the report. Now, here's a scenario that I think you will find concerning. Assuming I admit those emails and any testimony, there were a substantial number of people here in November. I don't know how many of them wanted to testify because there was a continuance given. And I believe there was some testimony taken. But in any event, if I have an old environmental and I have current information from the public that I haven't seen the environmental, so I don't know what it says, so I don't want to hypothesize, but I will consider evidence from the public. And you're an expert who I've requested to be here in person will not be able to present new evidence to rebut that because that's not allowed under the rules. So how are you planning on addressing that?
So we have also received a number of the concerns, and they are perfectly reasonable, and so we want to honor all of the concerns, including the one that has been stated about the eagle's nest in the southeast quadrant. So the environmentalist, we requested that they return to the site, and they have plans to do so and collect coordinates for everything that they find, and that is I think scheduled to be done this week. So this is still something that we are gathering because we just received the email last week about the eagle. So this is something that's still ongoing.
Well, my point is that if I am not asking you to do an updated environmental because that's beyond my authority to do that. I'm just pointing out that if there is testimony, not only about the Eagle, but there's a substantial number of other environmental concerns that have been raised back in November and since November. And if that evidence comes in, which it wouldn't surprise me that it did come in, your expert will not be allowed under the rules to address that at the hearing unless information is provided to the city in timely fashion prior to the hearing. So once again, how are you planning on addressing that?
It sounds like since there needs to be significant time prior to the hearing to present any new information to you, that it would probably be safer to ask for the date of the 23rd. Does that give us?
I think you are. I think you're singing my song right now. But my direct question is: are you planning on having your environmental expert do a supplemental report? Because if that person's not going to do that, once again, he or she will not be allowed to testify at the hearing, presenting new evidence that was not presented prior to the deadline.
Right, that's right. It sounds like it makes much more sense to have a supplemental report done so that all of the information is given in a clear fashion and so that the conversation can be held in a good way. Since there have been, we also have received numerous emails about other listed species, and so of course that is one of the things that was done in the first environmental report. So it sounds like a supplemental item is what's in order to go back and address all of those concerns.
All right, and I am specifically requesting that I receive the old environmental today, electronically and in person, and also the updated one in timely fashion. And I'm also asking that both of them be put in the packet for the continued hearing date, which means they would be provided to the clerk, because I don't believe the clerk received those documents prior to November. And she's nodding that is correct. Okay. All right. So I think that's all I have to ask you at this time. Can I have staff up, please? Can I ask why I did not receive the environmental I requested at the last hearing?
Well, we haven't had, because we've had the set of continuances that have been requested, I was going to, whenever we were going to have the final date that we knew of, at that time you would have received the environmental survey. To my knowledge, while you had mentioned at the official hearing that we had that you hadn't received the environmental survey, unlike some other requests such as the surrounding Sandoval ordinances, I don't believe we got a direct request to have that sent outside of the normal public hearing sort of channels that we usually do, where we upload documents to NOVIS and things of that sort. That was my knowledge of why you hadn't received the environmental outside of the normal, chains of communication, which are, the NOVIS packets and the sending of materials that way.
Well, why wasn't it included in the packet for today? Because obviously it's an issue that is important to the public.
I don't know. It was a staff error where it wasn't included in the original packet.
All right, and just for the record, I believe I did directly request the environmental report at either the last hearing or the November hearing.
That was a misperception on my part, that you wanted it as a separate document to the public hearing documents that you normally receive.
Right. Well, and in the future, I would like to have all environmentals included in all PDPs.
Correct. And that's standard practice to include all of the environmental studies that's done, especially for PDPs that would include, physical construction of things.
Right. Okay. So just for the record, if I get future hearings documents that don't have the environmental, I think that's going to be problematic.
Okay.
Just so we're crystal clear here.
Understood.
All right. And so I have another request, which is when, actually maybe it's an instruction. When the applicant provides the supplemental environmental that she's just indicated will be in the pipeline, I would like the environmental person who is on staff with the Community Development Department to review it and present testimony as to that review. I believe that Justin is still employed by the city, correct?
He is, yes. Okay. He is not necessarily our environmental planner, as we don't really have one of those. He was probably the most experienced and knowledgeable planner that we have dealing with environmental issues. If that's the direction you'd like to go, we can have him come up here and provide testimony that way.
Well, I think it's beyond my jurisdiction to say person X should review it. I mean, that's certainly decision for the Community Development Department.
Right.
But I
I
do
mean,
want,
generally, we don't, and this is probably more procedural than anything. The city has some wildlife regulations. We have, things, we have eagle ordinances, but for the most part, most of the sort of environmental issues that, come up are generally outside of the city's jurisdiction of review. We look at things for where there's owl burrows, where there's eagle nests, gopher tortoise burrows. However, all of those except for the eagles, and I believe the owls may have some city regulations nowadays, those are all fall within the purview of state, guidelines
federal.
or federal guidelines.
I'm aware of that.
So we do an environmental review, but usually it is just to make sure that there aren't presence of those species. So in terms of, I'm not exactly sure what you're looking for from the testimony from Justin or whomever is deemed, appropriate to speak on that, as most of the issues are, if it's a wetland issue, it's usually, that is, there's a review done by environmental or Army Corps of Engineers, or wetlands, with the South Florida Water Management District. So I'm not exactly sure what exactly you're seeking from DCD staff on that environmental report.
Well, I am aware of the federal, state, regional, and other types of regulations that affect this project and other projects. And I'm not suggesting the city has jurisdiction, nor should it have jurisdiction. What I'm asking staff to do is to have whoever on DCD staff has an environmental background, review the original and the supplemental environmental, and opine on those issues that are relevant to the city consideration, because the PDP process does provide for review of issues under the city's jurisdiction. I'm not requesting a review of issues that are external to the city's jurisdiction, because that would be probably not helpful. Because if it's outside my jurisdiction, I have no reason to opine on it.
Right. So what we're getting at is issues that are under the city's jurisdiction, like the location of eagles' nests and or burrowing owl and or gopher tortoises. Those are the things you would like him to opine on?
I would like him to opine on anything in the environmental that is under the city's jurisdiction and applies to environmental.
Okay.
I'm not going to restrict it to specific examples.
All right.
Okay? And may I have the environmental study? And can I have it electronically today as well, please?
Yes, you can.
All right. All right, this is a public hearing. There's a member of the public that I would like to call at this time. I'm sorry, sir, I don't believe that you put your name on this.
I'm the mystery presenter here from the public. Yes,
You're
my
Don
name.
and Eve.
That's my email address. My name is Donald
Yes, sir. What's your last-
Melchiorre. Melchiorre. Apologize for the oversight.
Oh, it's okay.
I believe you've should have received a letter from me, which was sent to the HexDocs email address.
I did.
Good. I just wanted to further elaborate on the fact that this was merely an update based on the public agenda that was available for this meeting, and also to make the point that this had been previously provided, a similar letter had been previously provided by our attorney, Steve Hartzell, but we decided to do any updates in-house, and our president, Debbie Davidson, has appointed me as a resident of Cape Royal, also known as Royalty. I wanted to make that point here for legal distinctions for future, in case somewhere down the road a reference to Royalty is presented as opposed to a reference to Cape Royal on some document, that they are one and the same. So that was one reason for sending this letter. And the main reason for doing this letter, and I want to again thank the city, Ensight, MSI, for being helpful in accomplishing what we've wanted to accomplish by getting a suitable buffer between our properties. Ensight has been accommodating in that. But these projects have a way of taking on a life of their own once they're approved, assuming it does get approved. Down the road somewhere, we wanted to make sure, should there be a new owner, should there be new personnel involved, that it was absolutely clear that even though this buffer is not required the buffer as designed in the project is not required by statute or by code, that it is the intention, the full intention of the owner of the property, the developer of the property, to provide it. You might notice on one of the drawings where it describes the buffer in some detail, I believe it's a landscape drawing, an LA drawing, that it says, it describes the buffer but says not required. We wanted to be clear that in some future time, were the developer to decide to change his mind about this, that it was quite clear that it is his intention to provide it despite being required to do that by statute. Also, the letter was just to reiterate one point that Steve Hartzell made in the prior letter, which asks that a reference to the LA01 and LA02 drawing be included in a specified paragraph of the development order. That's the paragraph that starts the second page of the letter. Any question about that you might have?
I don't normally question people that come in to testify public comment, sir. Thank you.
Very good. So I think you can expect to have yet a further, just to risk of creating confusion with an abundance of correspondence. I will be, once we establish the date for the further continued hearing, I will, because that will undoubtedly have different revisions to the pertinent drawings that are referenced on this letter. I'll be sending you yet another letter which include those updates. Just wanted to be clear about that so there's no confusion down the road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to testify, ma'am?
He said everything we need to say. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, let me say a couple of things. First, I've asked, and I don't normally respond to public comment, but since you've been kind enough to not only come but also provide documents, and also because we're winding down in this hearing. First, I've asked staff to put conditions into the draft development order. I am not bound, obviously, by the draft development order. It's a draft, so I obviously have the jurisdiction to consider and accept or reject any requests of applicant or the public or staff or I think I've covered the waterfront on those folks. So that's number one. Number two, the reason I've asked staff to put what I'm calling the specific conditions or the special conditions into the draft development order is because though anything that is in writing in that development order as it's finally issued will supersede anything in the plans. So I think that maybe addresses part of your concern. Thirdly, if you've been in prior hearings, which I think you probably were, you know I'm an enthusiastic proponent of people coming and testifying. So in my world, there is no redundancy in people coming multiple times and testifying. Your voice is important, and zoning affects the most basic rights we have as Americans. So I'm very enthusiastic about people coming and testifying, even if it's multiple times. That's never a problem. And providing additional information is never a problem. So, and as you can probably see from standing at the podium, there are new plans which the applicant is providing. So, and I suspect this may be an ongoing situation. And I've also asked the clerk to put on when the continuation date is announced and the packet is on the website, I've asked the clerk to put the staff provided original environmental report and any supplemental, and of course any supplemental report from or a supplemental application from the applicant, and any revisions of staff report, et cetera, by staff. All of that will be on the website for review prior to the hearing. So it's very important that everyone understand exactly what is being proposed and exactly what's being testified to. Okay, so I think that addresses your concern. So, and Madam Clerk, I know that you're very thorough in doing that, so I'm going to ask you to let me know that all of those documents have been provided before it's put on the website. Thank you. Can I have the applicant back up, please? So I'm hearing you say that you would prefer, if that's the right word, the second hearing date in February?
I think that that would be the best option to make sure that everything is done accordingly.
I think that's a good idea, and I know your client is chomping at the bit to get going, but
Naturally.
we gotta cross all the Ts here, because
Absolutely.
we don't want somebody to uncross them down the road. Madam
Absolutely.
Clerk, when is our second hearing date in February? All right, is that acceptable?
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think that's correct. Yeah, I think it's the 23rd, 25th.
Okay, thank you. 25th is okay? All right,
Yes.
and you can have all your
Yes.
folks here that day?
Yes, and I just want to say thank you so much for the statement that you just made about the conditions and the language of the drafted DO. It's something that I've been trying to explain to the Sandoval Community Association as well, and you guys, to make sure they understand how the protections will be implemented for them, and because they're very focused on the plans, and I wanted to share that. So I am going to ask them to watch this hearing and listen to your statement so they can feel reassured. And it reminded me, while I was talking to the board last week, they refer to the website often to go back and look at the plans, and if they're a little bit out of date or we've given them, it can be very confusing. So we will make sure to get everything to you and request that it's on the website, and try to communicate to them when there's been something new. And I think that's something that's very important. So we really appreciate the clerk's hard work and your hard work getting new material on the website.
And
Thank you.
due to the complexity and the number of times we've had this continued, I would request applicant to send in documents prior to the drop dead time.
And so can we review quickly the way the documents should roll? And we're going to get you the supplemental environmental and then as soon as possible, which
And the original, but I think.
and
I think
the
Mr.
original within the
Boyko's
next
gonna take
24
care of it.
hours. And then the supplemental will be completed as soon as possible, and we'll be working on that. And then with the 25th being, it's 7 days prior for any new text changes. Am I making sure we are saying that right?
The hearing examiner's deadline for applicant materials is the Thursday prior to the hearing. Staff's deadline is 1 week prior to the hearing. Madam Hearing Examiner, would you be okay with them providing, following the staff's deadline for material submission of 1 week? Or would you like it sooner than that?
I would like it sooner than that, and I think out of respect for the level of public interest, that if it's possible to have that available to the public prior to that, that would be helpful. And I hear our Assistant City Attorney wants to.
John
weigh in.
Niclario, City Attorney's Office. Obviously, there's a deadline for the applicant and a deadline for staff, but staff has to analyze and respond to the plans and everything that's submitted. So I think it would be wise for the applicant to have everything in much earlier than staff's deadline, because otherwise staff's going to have to ask for another continuance on February 25th if they didn't have time to review and get their report out timely. So we would strongly recommend that documents be submitted as soon as possible, with the understanding staff needs time to review and they have a deadline.
Right, okay. And of course, staff needs to get their documents in as soon as possible. But let's go back to the applicant. I think that's what you were saying, so
Right.
if our hearing date will be February 25th at 9 o'clock, when can you comfortably get those documents to staff? And I'm going to ask staff to get them to me earlier than the deadline that is set out in the regulations.
Right, so today is January 7th, and we're talking about February 25th. That's a pretty significant window. without knowing exactly what is going to come up for the supplemental environmental. That's the only variable that could be have unexpected surprises here. So, but I don't see it being an issue to get all of the documentation we need by the end of this month. That's so February 1st should give us a significant window of review time. I think that seems okay. So it seems to me, just from my experience with the environmental stuff, that's the way it'll probably work out, around the 1st of the month of February. Is that acceptable?
That sounds good, and then if you can submit that to staff, and staff submit it directly to me on that date, I would appreciate that.
Okay,
Okay,
fantastic.
that sounds good. Now let's go over to Mr. Boyko. When is the earliest you can get me the documents? And given the level of public interest, I would suspect the public would like to review them as well.
Just to be clear, which documents are we referencing? Are we talking about the environmental study, or are we talking about the revised development or the staff report? I'd like to be clear kind of what we're getting at with this.
Sure. Well, the supplemental environmental will be a straight pass-through.
Correct.
So assuming you get it February 1st, I don't know what day of the week that is. Somebody help me out here.
That's a Saturday, I believe.
Okay, so it'll be Monday. If you can do a direct pass-through when you receive it, pass it on to me, that would be helpful. What I'm
Understood.
really addressing is the revised draft development order provisions with the special conditions and special or unique conditions incorporated into it, and also the revised staff report and revised PowerPoint.
So you're indicating that you would like them prior to the 18th, which is the week deadline,
That's correct.
as determined by the Land Development Code?
Right, if you're receiving, I'm assuming the applicant's going to send you all the revisions by, and I'm seeing a nod, by February 1st. What's as soon as you can get to me all of your documents as revised?
I mean, that's a,
We have well over a month for this.
oh, I understand. I can give you some, I mean, I don't like to make promises, especially things that are outside mandates by our LDC. We can shoot for 2 weeks prior, maybe the 11th.
Okay,
This is sort of uncharted territory for us. We're not used to, having a deadline of when to provide dates earlier than what's set out in our Land Development Code.
I totally understand, and I wouldn't normally do it, but I think this is a circumstance where we're on our third continuance. So I think under that circumstance, and I know you have other obligations besides this one hearing, as we all do, obviously. So let me see what day of the week that is, so we don't have any. That is oh, that's not what that is. That's a Tuesday. Actually, there are hearings on February 11th, which is the date that do you know if you have another hearing coming up offhand?
Don't believe, well,
You don't know.
do not believe I have anything scheduled for February 11th.
Okay. Well, if you can get it to me, whatever you want to, the revised staff report, the revised PowerPoint, the revised draft development order, and I'm assuming that the environmental review I've requested by staff will be in writing as well. If all of those documents can get to me no later than February 11th, I think that would work.
Okay.
And I am asking that that be a hard deadline, given the extraordinary circumstance of being the third continuance and our Assistant City Attorney's wise counsel that we don't want to go into a fourth one. I don't think anyone does. I don't think the
No,
public does.
I agree. Yes, we are all in agreement that we want this to get underway and, get wrapped up and completed. So we will do our best. Just so we're all on the same page and we're clear, since this is sort of new ground for us all, say something happens and that deadline of the 11th is not made, is there some sort of, penalty or, repercussion for that? I mean, we have, and I say that just because I am trying to, John, our city attorney will state that, we have that deadline that's in our Land Development Code, and we abide by that. And if we don't make that, then there are, legal framework as to you're not allowed to proceed and not allowed to submit after that. This
Understood.
is something that is done,
If I receive documents after February 11th, it'll be my discretion if I need additional time to review them, which
Right,
means
'cause-
you are looking at a potential fourth continuance. May I have the Assistant City Attorney opine on this subject?
I was going to just say that the hearing examiner has the discretion. I think that I would argue, if staff does not abide by your request, that the Land Development Code does allow staff to provide documents up to 1 week before. However, the hearing examiner has full discretion to request, and hopefully staff will comply.
I'm sure staff will enthusiastically comply. And by the way, it's a deadline.
We will give 110% in order to make sure those documents are provided to you on time.
All right, and I also don't know what Justin's schedule is like, so that may play a factor in here, but we are talking about well over a month from today.
Understood. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I just wanted to put everything out there just so that we were all clear and on the same page as to, the new rules going forward for this case.
I understand that. And I appreciate your insight. Anything else, Mr. Boyko?
I have nothing else to share.
Do you have that environmental for me?
I do, but this is our packet copy, so I will make a copy downstairs, and if you just want to pick up the zoning counter, is that okay?
That's okay, and you also please send it to me electronically?
Yes, we will do that posting.
Okay, and you also make it available to, or the applicant someone will make it available to the neighboring communities who have expressed great interest in the
Yes,
environmental
we will
issues.
we will make that as an addendum to the website information that we currently have up there right now.
I would appreciate that. Okey dokey. Well, and is February 25th convenient for staff?
Yes, it is.
And once again, I'm requesting that, that additional staff members be available to testify regarding the items that we've discussed at the last hearing.
Yes, we will have transportation staff here to testify regarding the engineering design standards deviations, and then we will also have someone from fire or EMT to speak about those deviation requests as well.
All right, who would be testifying as to issues regarding to evacuations relevant to hurricane?
For hurricane well, I thought, so are you interested in hurricane evacuations, or are you talking about fire access?
Both.
For the fire access, we would have there's a couple of people that could speak on that depending on what their scheduling is like for that time. For hurricane evacuation, we have a individual who is in charge of sort of the emergency response teams. It used to be an individual by the name of Jesse, but I don't believe he's here any longer. We will find someone that is experienced in sort of emergency operations to come and speak about evacuation routes.
Okay, that's fine, because of the request, I have concerns about whether, we're going to need testimony on those subjects, as I referenced at either the last hearing or the hearing before last.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so with all of that on the record, I will at this time continue this hearing to February 25th at 9 a.m. with the deadlines and requests that are on record at this time. I am closing this hearing at this time, moving on to the next subject, which is the date and time of the next hearing, Tuesday, January 28th, 2020 at 9 a.m. here in council chambers. Having nothing else to come before me this morning, I will announce we stand adjourned at 9:40 a.m. Thank you, everyone.